We have had some great panel discussions already today, and before the next one we're going to go over to the offices of Northrop Grumman in Virginia to talk to the chairman and chief executive officer there, Kathy Warden. Kathy leads a company of 90,000 people that work across the realms of space aeronautics, defense and cyberspace, and she's passionate about the concept of information advantage in national security, something we've very much been talking about today, and I'm delighted to welcome her. Thank you for joining us, Kathy.
Thank you, Samira. It's wonderful to be with you. I wish I could be with you on the aircraft carrier.
Well, I know, it's quite fun here, I have to say. Now, can we start with the digital revolution that we're living through? We've talked so much today about cyber attacks, about AI, obviously what they can enable in terms of AI and digital technology, but also, very dramatically, the changed nature of threats that the US, the UK, and their allies now face. And today we were talking specifically about the emergence of a apparent Russian threat to take down aspects of the Tokyo Olympics that were due to take place this year. So technically a kind of sub-military threat. And I wondered from your perspective how you would see the sort of the nature of the threat that the UK, the US and their allies now face.
Well, as you note, the threat environment is developing both in complexity and variety. And I think there are a number of factors that are contributing to that. You noted the importance of technology, and I would really point specifically to the pace at which technology is advancing. We have not seen this type of rapid advancement in our history, and it puts the onus on all of us to understand what new threat vectors are created by the introduction of new technology, as well as how do we counter those. But I think there are a couple of other factors that are worth noting as well. One is we are operating in more domains than we have in the past. We first mastered the seas and land, then mastered air, but today we also have to equip ourselves to operate within cyberspace and space. And these two domains have their own complexities. We have to be able to understand the domain in which we're operating, but also have the capabilities to operate freely within them. And then I point to a third item, which is the global economy. We have seen other nations have the ability to invest more heavily in these capabilities and technologies that I just spoke of, as well as non-state actors now have access to these technologies. And so it's really creating an environment where there's more complexity and variety in the threats.
Let's dive into sort of some of the specifics about how a company like Northrop Grumman, has changed to deal with the changing nature of threats. So can you give us a bit of insight into how the company's adapted its thinking, its investment and its R&D to help your customers stay ahead of all these new threats?
Absolutely. Research and development is at the core of how we stay ahead. We are inventors and innovators, and we have to continue to focus our company's resources not just on using technology as it exists today, but creating the next iteration of it. We often use our tagline, defining possible, to inspire our workforce to think not just of what's available in today's environment and not just what is the threat that we have to counter today, but what will the future look like and how do we evolve toward it. And we need to do that in close partnership with our customers to understand how they plan to operate in the future and to share with them how we see technology enabling those operations. And then finally, I think it's very important that we collaborate, recognizing that all good inventions and ideas don't come from one company or one part of our military apparatus, but instead it's the sharing of information that makes us all stronger and allows us to innovate and advance together.
So if we looked at something that, again, just to take a kind of a general member of the public's point of view, might think, so conventional weaponry, things like missiles, how has thinking about something like that changed for your company and your clients?
Well, we think about what does that capability need to look like a decade or more from now, and then work our way back to what are the core inventions that would enable us to have an asymmetric capability against adversaries. And so when we think about any given technology, it can be material sciences, the sensors that go into the weapon system, it can be information and how that information is used inside the system to command and control it. And so there are many components of innovation that need to occur to make a capability better and more capable than what an adversary has today, and also that can counter threats as they're going to evolve into the future. And as I noted, it's important that when we work on these types of technologies, we not think about them in stovepipes, but how they will work together in a collection. And so interoperability becomes extremely important as requirements for any system to work in a collection of systems.
One of the real challenges of kind of growing cyber threats is the fact that more and more defense technology is itself then vulnerable to cyber attack. And I wonder how that has affected the way that you develop products and you think about your R&D, and indeed the level of threat.
It's a really important point. We build cyber resiliency into every product. And the reason for that is because the products themselves can indeed be a vulnerability, a threat entry point, if we don't design them to be resilient. We want to use them to collect information, not as entry points into a network or collection of systems that can create a vulnerability. And that goes to thinking about cyber in the design of the system, all the way through how it's developed, manufactured, and ultimately used and maintained as well.
I said in introducing you that you were a particular advocate of the importance of information advantage in national security. Could you tell me a bit more about what that means in practice?
So we believe that information advantage is going to be the discriminator in the 21st century. And what we first want to always do is have effective deterrence so that we don't find ourselves in conflicts that we don't want to be in. But we need to have information that enables that deterrent strategy. And when we find ourselves in conflict, information will be key to engaging effectively and winning in conflict. So let me give you an example of a few places where I think information today is being used in ways that it hasn't been in the past and is key to creating that advantage. Now, the first is thinking about how machine speed learning and artificial intelligence can be deployed in the battle space. Autonomy is a good example of this, where we have systems that take information from many sources and are able to, through machine learning, build new route schemas based on the threat environment that's being detected real time. Human pilots are very capable of responding, but not to the large amounts of information that's simultaneously able to be fed into systems that with algorithms are then able to provide alternatives for pilots to use. And so we're first applying this technology in autonomous systems, but this kind of real-time rerouting is something that you could envision in any system command and control structure. But it's not just enough to have each system be very capable. We also look at the interconnection of systems. How can, if we connect many sensors that have different angles of information collection to many effectors who have the capability to take action, are we able to make each one of those systems more effective than they are operating independently or in a stovepipe? And we have systems today and architectures that are creating that kind of interconnection that allows us to be more lethal and more capable in detecting threats and affecting outcomes than ever before. These are just a couple of examples how technology interconnection and compatibility are important in a system level, not just in an individual weapon system.
As you'll know very well, of course, the US, the UK are very much refocusing defence investment, thinking very carefully about where is the smartest place to invest and to invest at scale. How do you think we should be thinking about kind of embedding digital cyber capability across platforms in every domain?
So there are a couple of things that I would point to as key enablers for this kind of interoperability and interconnectedness that I've talked about. First, having visions of how we will operate across domain. And I know the UK is engaged in dialogue with the US about what a coalition level multi-domain command and control structure would look like. This is important because it drives then requirements into the systems that are going to operate within that architecture. Then each system itself needs to be built with those interoperability standards in mind so that systems can effectively exchange information and create that information advantage that we were just speaking about. And then finally, those systems have to be developed in a way that they are each able to perform their function in a system of systems with resilience and the effectivity that they are designed to accomplish. So all of this has to occur within a broader architecture, all driven by how our coalition partners plan to integrate on a go-forward basis. And that's why I'm so excited about the conversations that are happening between the UK and the US as to what that kind of coalition capability needs to look like. And then systems are being developed by each nation with the intent to operate together.
And for the benefit of those of us who perhaps don't have the level of insight and expertise of kind of military operations that you might, can you almost describe for us what a truly interconnected battle space would look like, would be like for commanders?
Yes, it would be the ability to rely on information collected from a system in any domain that can very rapidly be brought to bear to inform the decision at the local level, and then be automatically used to queue effectors and battlefield systems that would allow operations to be conducted so that the commander has positive control over the information and how it's utilized, but the speed at which it is able to be brought to bear is accelerated, and the access to information that today commanders don't have access to because it sits in other stovepipe systems or other domains is the vision of the future.
And just again, it's for my benefit really, can you give an example of the kind of data you're talking about that commanders would be able to have instant access to at the moment they might not?
Yes, a good example would be data that comes from a space system that's providing wide area surveillance that needs to get to the operator on the ground to make decisions about where a particular threat is geographically and the best way to approach that threat, whether it be land-based, sea-based. These types of cross-domain information sharing opportunities exist today, being able to accelerate the speed at which that information is shared across domain, as well as enable the operation upon that information, is what commanders talk about when they discuss multi-domain command and control.
A practical question that's kind of emerged in the public sphere is this debate around the role of the human when so much more is enabled digitally. So if we talk, for example, about drone pilots, it feels like it's still relatively early in understanding the impact that some of these technologies have on their human users. And I wonder how far you've been doing research into thinking about that and learning lessons from the deployments that have already been used.
It's a very important question. When we think about technologies like artificial intelligence, we absolutely think about the policy around the technology that protects everything from human rights and what decisions might be made that would create technology that is making decisions without the human intent behind it, to how would these technologies be used in conjunction with the manned forces that exist today. So when you think about aircraft today, autonomous systems are very capable and used to provide long endurance. We wouldn't want to put a manned pilot in a situation where we're asking them to do surveillance runs for 24, 36 hours, but we absolutely can use a high altitude, long endurance platform that would do just that. So there are certain missions that work exceedingly well scale for unmanned platforms. Another good example is that there are situations where we don't want to put people in harm's way, and unmanned platforms create an option for our commanders in those situations. So I very much see when we talk about things like unmanned versus manned systems, there being a role for each and a important way for us to think about them working effectively together, more so than one replacing the other.
Clearly, for a company like yours, the relationship between a business and a kind of government spending on military has always been a relationship. But I wonder how far, with this huge change and a shift towards much more cyber technology, AI and so on, it's changed the nature of a business's role in its relationship with a defence force.
It absolutely requires industry to be partnering very closely with our customers because, as I said, these technologies are advancing at a rapid rate, and we oftentimes need to share with customers what is the art of the possible, and therefore have an interactive dialogue about how much risk do we want to take, what are the imperatives for timing of delivery of capabilities versus the capability itself and the sophistication of the capability. And so more and more our conversations with customers revolve around the imperative of speed in what we're delivering, and wanting solutions that can be rapidly fielded and then incrementally built upon. This is a different way of designing systems than we perhaps would have approached things 20 years ago. And yet it's because we're having these dialogues that we are building systems now that are more adaptable over time and that we can add capability to as we migrate. And I think this is a really important progression of the defense community working in conjunction with our customers.
And has it changed the kinds of people you want to recruit?
We are still recruiting and attracting the most talented engineers in the world. One of the things that I'm very proud of in this industry is that we truly have been inventors and pioneers of technologies that have not just changed the landscape of defense, but also have impacted our lives on commercial scale. Everything from the exploration of space as a domain, which this industry contributed to air travel, which we all used to rely very heavily on, and I'm sure we will again soon, from GPS to cell phone technology. All of that has its origins in technology innovation that occurred in this industry. And so we are still recruiting the most talented engineers, scientists in the world, and we're still inventing. And we can't always talk about all of those inventions in public forums, and it may take decades for them to truly be understood, appreciated, and adapted to commercial use. But we are still very much hiring the same types of people that we always have.
You mentioned that often there's a need to react with speed because of what your clients need. And so much of what's emerged in our conversations here at the forum today has been about the disruption that is the kind of key threat, which is all about destabilizing. Does it make it hard for a company like yours to sort of plan ahead and think sort of independently about defense, when in a sense everyone is responding to a disruption that's coming from an enemy actor?
Well, certainly we do more scenario planning as a result of the volatility in the environment that we face. And I think that's true of any industry today. And it goes back to what you were noting with the rapid pace of change. I see ourselves also collaborating more, learning from others, taking practices from other industries, other companies, and working more with others who seek to innovate and create technology application that addresses those disruptions. So these are good progressions in my mind for both our industry as well as our defense complex as a whole, to include our customers. When we get disrupted, it causes us to work at speed to innovate and reinvigorate our capabilities, and that is progress.
One final question is, some people might think, with all the focus on cyber threats and how easy it is to take down, cities, energy, and things like that, they might wonder if warfare in the old-fashioned kind of conventional sense is really a priority anymore. I wonder what you would say. Conventional warfare.
I think absolutely, and I go back to the point that I made about a strategic deterrent is the best defense. We want to avoid conflict. We want other nation-state and non-nation-state actors to think twice before taking steps to take down our power grid or to take actions in cyberspace, as well as kinetic activity in other domains. And so an effective deterrent helps to address and keep in check the number of threats that we need to be addressing simultaneously, but recognizing we won't deter everything. We need to be able to operate in each domain effectively. And I would say cyber is one of the more challenging domains because it is not physical in nature. And so it is more challenging to see and to operate at speed. But again, this is a disruption that is helping us to innovate and get better. And it's teaching us things about how we can operate better in the other physical domains as well.
Cathy Warden, CEO of Northrop Grumman, thank you so much for taking the time to give us this insight into the kind of challenges ahead and indeed the way that your company is thinking. So thank you again. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll next be having our final panel of the day, which will be about the future of globalization and reshaping the trade agenda.